Hi darlings, welcome back to my channel. Today I have a new sewing class prepared for you on how to make a dress that you see next to me. So in today's sewing class, I will show you everything you need to know about making this dress from the beginning to the finish. This means that we will do our own pattern and then I will guide you through each step on how to assemble this beautiful dress. Now this dress is really loosely fitting, so you will not have to worry about precise fitting at this time. It will be a great companion for you in spring and summer, and it will really make your wardrobe pop out. I would love to call this dress an afternoon dress because it's literally how long it will take for you to make this dress. Just one short afternoon. Yes, this is exactly how fast you can make this dress. Before moving further to the video, I want to give a huge shout out to Mettler, who is the sponsor of today's video. So Mettler stands for Thread, Color and Imagination. Mettler was founded in Switzerland in 1883, and since 1988 it has been the part of Amann Group. Mettler has a wide range of products, so any kind of creative will find the right thread, no matter if you're doing sewing, quilting, overlocking or embroidery. Mettler threads are available in huge variety of different colors, surface finishes, looks and effects. All Mettler threads are produced to the highest quality standards. And you can find Mettler threads in Europe, Asia, North America, Africa and Australia, so basically everywhere around the world. So big thanks for Mettler for sponsoring this video, and in the video I will show you different Mettler threads and I will explain all the benefits that you have by using these threads. So without any further ado, let's move further to the video. So, to start our class, let's review what kind of materials we will need to make our dress. First, of course, is the fabric that we will use to create our dress. So, any kind of fabric, lightweight to medium weight will be great, and you can choose depending on what kind of color or print you want. I do recommend you choosing fabric that has quite a bit of stretch, because it will make it a little bit more comfortable to wear. Now, before cutting our fabric, I want you to wash it and iron it well, because washing the fabric before cutting it out, it prevents the clothing from shrinking later on. So do make sure that you wash and dry your fabric before cutting it out, and also take your time and iron it so that when you will be cutting your pattern, your fabric will be smooth and wrinkle free. So next thing that you will need is fusible interfacing. So because I'm using lightweight fabric, I will be using lightweight interfacing. You don't need to have very strong interfacing. Lightweight interfacing is a great option in this case, and we will use it to interface the inside of our neckline. Another interfacing that you will need is reinforced fusible interfacing. So here you can see that the thread is running all along the strap, and we will use this interfacing to stabilize our neckline and really make it very sharp and beautiful looking. So now what kind of threads we will need? Because I am using fabric that has quite a bit of stretch, I want my shoulders and I want the side seams to also have the same stretch. So I will use Mettler Seraflex thread, which is an innovative thread because it has twice the elongation of standard thread, which means that you can sew quite elastic seams and they will not pop out while you wear the garment. Also, I will do a little bit of overlocking, so I will need a matching overlock, and today I will use Mettler Ceracore, which is a multi-purpose overlock thread, and you can use it on any kind of overlock. It has great gliding properties and it's really a trouble-free thread which maintains its color even after a lot of washes. So we will use overlock to cover our seam allowance and and our overlock seams will not be the holding seams, so you don't have to use 4-thread overlock. It's okay to use 3-thread overlock because we will only do overlock stitches on the seam allowance to prevent it from fraying. And lastly, I will be using a Mettler Ceralon thread. If you're living outside Europe, you might know this thread as Metrocen, and it's all-purpose thread which shines beautifully, has great elongation and has good sewing properties. So because this thread will be visible on the outside, we will do stop stitching with it, and we will do stitching where we do not need extra elasticity. We will do the neckline with it as well as hemming and the bottom of the sleeve. So we really do not need as much elasticity as we will need for the side seams where we will use Ceraflex. So we don't need this thread to be that elastic, but we really wanted to blend beautifully with the main fabric. So when you're choosing your top stitching thread, just put it on the fabric and see how well it disappears. So you want the thread that you will do top stitching with to be as close of a match with your main fabric as possible. So here are all the things that we will need to make our dress, and now let's move to the measuring. So to create the pattern for our dress, we will need to take our measurements. So here are the measurements that you will need. So of course you will need bust circumference, which is at the widest place of your bust, so something like this. Now you will also need the waist measurement, which is the most narrow part of the waist. So our dress is not fitted at the waistline, but we are taking this as a measurement because for the width of the dress we will need to use the width that is the widest, so either bust, either waistline, or either hips. For me, it's the hips. They're always the widest part for me. So all the width of my dress will be a bit wider than my hips. But let's say if your bust is the widest part of your body, then of course the entire dress has to be as wide as your bust. I hope this is making sense to you. Now, second thing that we need to measure is the hip circumference, and the hip circumference is measured at the widest point of the hips. Now let's turn our mannequin around, and here are the measures that we will take from the back. So from the highest shoulder point, for me this point is somewhere here. You see how it's the highest point of the shoulders. So from this point we will measure the height of our back, so from the highest point of the shoulder to our waistline. Then we will measure the height of our hips, which will be from the waistline to the widest point of our hips. So usually this measure is about 21 centimeters, something like that. But depending on your figure, it can be either higher or lower. And then from the highest point of your shoulder, measure how long you want your dress to be. So in my case, I want the dress to be way below the knees, so I will measure 109 centimeters. And last thing I want you to take the measure is the armhole depth. So the armhole depth is measured like this, from the highest point of the shoulder to the beginning of the armhole. In general speaking, it's easiest to just put the ruler like this. I will show it on the mannequin as well. You put the ruler where the armhole finishes, simply roll it like this and measure from the highest point to the armhole line. So usually this measure is about 22 centimeters. We will not need this measure in particularly, but it will be our control point. In case you want to do a bit narrow sleeves here at the beginning of the sleeves, so just know that if you're doing narrow sleeves, the beginning of the sleeve here has to be as narrow as the armhole depth. And then lastly, we have to measure our sleeves. So the width of the sleeves will be measured from the center of the back all the way to the side where you want your sleeves to to end. In my case, it will be 38 centimeters because this means that one length of the back will be 2 times 35, which means 70 centimeters, right? And then because our front will be exactly the same width, meaning 2 times 70 is 1 meter and 40 centimeters. And this is exactly how wide my fabric is. So I want to fit everything in one layer. So I will make my sleeves as the half of my fabric. And the last measure that I will take is where I want my sleeves to end. I want to measure how wide I want them to be. So just simply measure it like this, where you want it to be. It doesn't matter where the sleeve finishes, just take your measure there. So now that you have all of the measurements prepared, let's move to the pattern making. So we will start by working on our pattern. So at the side, I want you to mark the dot at the top, and from that dot go down by your dress length. So in my case, it's 1 meter and 9 centimeters. Like this. Now return to the top of your dress pattern. Now from this point we will mark the length of our sleeves. So we measured the length from this center of the back all the way here. So in my case it is 35 centimeters. So from this point here I am marking 35 centimeters, and I am making sure that I have a nice 90-degree angle here. So now on this line, which is our back line or our middle line, because our pattern piece for the back and the front will be exactly the same except for the change in the neckline. So from this line here, we will mark the measure of our armhole or the width of our sleeve here. So we will mark half of that length here. In my case, I want the entire arm be 44 centimeters, so I will divide this number by 2 and I have 22 centimeters, and I mark it here. Now from this point on this line I will mark down the length of my back, which is 42 centimeters in my case, and from the waistline point, which is here, I will measure the height of my hips, which is 21 centimeters. So if you don't know your height of the hips, so it's measured from the back, from the waistline to the widest point of your hips. So now let's return to our top marking here, where we mark the armhole depth, and at this measure we will measure our bust circumference plus ease. So my bust circumference is 89 centimeters, and I really want some ease here, so I will add 8 centimeters, so total 97 centimeters, and we will divide it by 4. So here we have 24.3 millimeters. So 24 centimeters and a few millimeters here. Now we will go to our waistline and measure our waistline. So my waistline is 70 centimeters. So divided by 4, we have 17.5 centimeters. We are marking this measure just for our own, just for ourselves. So as a control point, because we will not do any kind of waistline here, just for our own point. So my hip circumference is 102 centimeters plus some ease, so I will add 4 centimeters for the ease, and I have 106 centimeters divided by 4, 26.5 centimeters. From this point, we will go down until our sleeve depth. Yeah, we can connect it like this. So my widest point of the body is my hip line. So from my hip point, I will go up, and now I will create just a little bit of curve here so that I have this beautiful, beautiful curve. It is up to you how curvy you want it to be. Our dress is almost finished. Now one step left to go. So now we have to do our neckline here. So my neckline width is 15 centimeters, both for the front and for the back. So I will mark it here from this point, 15 centimeters. Now my back neckline is 3 centimeters depth. So I will mark it here, and I will connect this point with beautiful curved line. You can mark that it's back line. And now for the front side, we will do on this same piece because we will be using the both sides of the dress. So from this point, we will measure the front neckline. So from this point, we will measure 8 centimeters. 8 centimeters is the standard depth. I want my dress neckline to be a little bit higher than the standard. So instead of 8 centimeters, I will go by 7 centimeters or maybe 6.5 even. So it's up for you to decide. The standard is 8 centimeters. I want mine to be a little bit closer fitting for this dress. So now I will connect this point with this point here, again with the beautiful curved line, and it will be my front neckline. So moving now to the bottom of our dress. So we will prolong this hip line over here, almost to the bottom. Now we will do a curve here at the bottom. So it's up for you to decide what kind of curve you want to do. I do really want to do quite a long and quite a nice curve, so I will do from this point 16, maybe 15 centimeters, and I will connect this dot with the curve. So it's actually up to you how you want your dress to be curved. Maybe you don't want to do a curve at all. This is how I wanted to do it. So here it is. So my pattern is finished. So I just want to explain once again how you have to cut it. So at the top, we will first cut our back neckline, then this sleeve here the curve all the way to the bottom curve, and then the fold line. Once we cut it out, we cut it from the piece of paper, and once it's done, we will then remove this back line and we will cut front, and then we will cut from the fabric again. Because our both front and back pieces here are identical, only a change in the front line, this is why we're not doing a second pattern piece. So now cut out this pattern and move to the fabric. So for the cutting of our dress, my fabric is ironed, washed, and is very, very smooth. So I always recommend ironing your fabric before cutting it out so that it's wrinkle-free and you can really cut your fabric accurately. So my fabric is actually the same from both sides. However, if you do cut from the printed fabric, so your right side of the fabric has to be facing upwards, and now we will fold one side of the fabric to the middle of our fabric, and this is where we will place our dress back piece. So because we want to fit in one line of the fabric, both back and the front of the dress, this is why we have folded it to the middle. However, if you are planning on doing wider dress and it will be in 2 layers, so you can fold it a little bit deeper than to the middle of the fabric. So now we will take our pattern piece and we will place it on the fold like this. So the edge is beautifully on the fold line, and now we will just draw with our chalk. So now let's remove this pattern piece and we can cut out our piece. So for the neckline, we will add 0.7 centimeters for the seam allowance. For the shoulders and for the sides, we will add 1.5 centimeters for seam allowance. And here at the sleeve and at the bottom of the curve, we will add 0.7 centimeters for seam allowance, because 0.7 centimeters is the width of my overlock. So we'll do very simple hemming this time. So I only need for the hemming the same width as my overlock seam. And now we will cut around our pattern. Of course, if you want, you can add seam allowance by simply marking with a chalk. I, however, like to cut it out as it is. So just simply guessing the width from the look of it while cutting. When you're cutting folded fabric, make sure that you're pressing with one hand so that the layers do not move. So now I will make a little notch here at the middle of my neckline so that I can later easily find the center of the neckline, and I will mark a letter B here so that I can later see that this is the back piece of my dress. Now I will cut my front piece exactly the same. However, before that I have to remove this part in my pattern, so I will just simply remove it, and exactly the same as I did now with the back piece, I will cut the front piece. So now that our front and back pieces are cut out, it's time to do our belt. And my belt will be as long as the width of this fabric. So my fabric is folded in half. And now we will have to count how wide our belt is going to be. So in the finished look, I want my belt to be 7 centimeters height. So because we will be folding the belt, so we need to double this number, so times 2. And we will add 1.5 centimeters for seam allowance from both sides, so I will add 3 centimeters in total, and now we have that the width I have to cut is 17 centimeters. So how I will do this, I will simply draw one line here. So now we don't want these to go to our final design, so I will just draw a quick line here to remember to get it out. And now I will just simply cut from this line to this line to this line, and then we will move to sewing machine. So once our fabric is cut out, it's time to start sewing and assembling our dress. The assembly of this dress is very quick and easy, so you will see how quickly it can be made. So for the beginning, we will be attaching our shoulders and the side seams, and we really want to give our seams some elasticity because we're using elastic fabric, and we really want that the seams at the shoulders and at the sides maintain that elasticity. So for today we will be using Mettler Seraflex thread, which is a very innovative thread. It has elongation of 65%, which is almost double compared to regular sewing thread, and it's really highly versatile thread. You can use it for active wear, for women's clothes, men clothes, kids wear, even lingerie and swimsuits. And this elasticity that this thread has really ensures that the seams made with this thread does not pop out and your seams stay elastic. Now, one more thing I have to mention about Mettler threads, what I love about them. When you're finished using them, you can just simply wrap it here, and then the end of the thread is not loose anymore, and it's very neat way to store your thread, so it's not loosely hanging anywhere, but it's very securely in place here. Our Seriflex is already installed in the sewing machine. The tension is released because we are working with elastic thread, so we don't want to stretch it before kneading, and also the Seriflex goes to the bobbin thread as well. So to start sewing, take your fabric and take the shoulder at the top. So this is the back piece and you are seeing the right side of the fabric. Next, I am taking the front piece and putting it right side to the right side with back piece, and I will be aligning all the corners, and I will just simply pin at the top so that both fabrics remain together while I'll be stitching them together. So at the shoulder we left 1.5 centimeters for seam allowance, so we will sew 1.5 centimeters from the edge, somewhere here in my case, and let's start sewing with regular stitch length. Secure the seam when starting to sew and just sew along the edge. And of course secure the stitch at the end. Now remove the pins, trim unnecessary threads, and repeat the same with another shoulder. Once the shoulders are attached, it's time to attach the side seams. So again, just simply pin all along the edge, and then we will be sewing with again 1.5 centimeter seam allowance. So now that we have pinned our entire side seam up until the beginning of the curve, it's time to start sewing it. Again, leaving 1.5 centimeters for the seam allowance. Don't forget to secure the seam at the beginning and the end. And now let's remove the pins. Now repeat the same with another side seam and then set this a little bit for aside, because after this we will start doing our belt. So now, while we still have our elastic thread on the sewing machine, it's time to do the belt. And for the belt, just take the belt right side up, fold it like this, and sew about 1.5 centimeters from the side. Don't forget to secure the stitch at the beginning. And sew until you reach 1.5 centimeters here. So something like that. Then while your needle is pushed to the fabric like this, you will raise your foot and just simply turn it to create a 90-degree angle. And then you will continue to sew until the middle of the belt. So it's up to you if you want to, pin this together, or you can just simply do as I do. So while I'll be sewing, I'll be folding the belt in half, and I will make sure that the sides are aligning. And sew approximately to the middle of your belt, so a few more centimeters for me. Secure the stitch at the end and do exactly the same with another end of your belt. And stitch this seam until about 4-5 centimeters till the previous seam, because this will be the hole through which we will be pulling our belt. So make sure that both ends are secured. Now, because we will be doing a very sharp corners for our belt, I want you to trim the corners. So the corners are trimmed like this. Try to cut diagonally as close to the seam as possible without damaging it. And now just a little bit more from each side. Again, do not damage the seam. So we are reducing the bulk, and this will ensure that our corner is beautiful and very, very sharp. And do exactly the same here and at the other end as well. And once you finish this step, let's move to ironing board. So now for the dress, I want you to take the shoulder seam, put it on the small ironing board like this, and I want you to iron the shoulder seam open. So very carefully. Try not to overpress your seams. You really want to just lightly glide through them. If you overpress your seams, they might be visible on the right side of the fabric and they might get that shine, if you know what I mean. So try not to do that. Lightly just glide through the fabric, give it a little bit of steam so that it starts to hold its shape. And you will repeat the same for the other shoulder. And when you do that, you will start ironing your side seams. So the side seams are ironed exactly the same as the shoulders. You will want to iron them open. But before ironing them open, I want you to take this part in particular to really try to make it straight and give it a good press. So why we are doing this step? So we have a curve here, which means that we don't have as much fabric here as we do here. So we want to overstretch this part and to really increase the amount of fabric we have here to play with. And then when we will be ironing them open, it will just fall much nicer. And do the same from the other side. Just take the fabric and try to straighten it up. And now you can see that we have created more fabric over here. So now that you will iron it open, you will have much better fall in this place. So continue to iron the other side of the dress exactly the same way. So once you iron your dress, set it a little bit aside, and now it's time to iron your belt. First, we will iron this seam open, and we will do it like this. Simply open it and press it. Now, this is very counterintuitive step because you might wonder why you need to do it at all. But the fact is, if you do this and if you iron it open first, later when we will turn it out, it will be much easier to neatly iron this seam. So I will just continue to press it and press all the way along. And also don't forget the side seams. Do exactly the same with them and iron them open. So now that you have ironed this seam open, you can remove this one. You won't need it at this step anymore. And now it's time to turn your belt inside out. We have plenty of space to work here, so it's really not that difficult. If you want, you can use some sharp, long object. So one side is out, and let's turn around another side as well. And the other side is out as well. Now for the corners, if you really want to achieve that sharp look, you will need to take one of your pins, just grab the fabric and pull it out. Here with another side as well. So really sharp corners. And now we can start the final iron of our belt. To do that, just take your belt, and because we ironed this seam open, it's now very easy for us to find the edge, and just make sure that the edge has a seam on it. and start pressing. Now we will be pressing the top part as well. So move slowly, take your time to really find that seam. And continue to iron all throughout your belt. Now that your belt is pressed, it looks like this from one side and like this from another side, and it is almost finished. It's looking really beautiful. Only part is left is to find the hole that we pulled our belt through, so here, and now we just have to, with a few stitches by hand, cover this hole. So I will not show this step, but I want you to take the remaining fabric left over from the dress and also take your dress, and we will now cut out the fabric that we'll need to create our neckline. So now I have my fabric leftovers here. I folded one part of it, and we will do the interfacing for our neckline. So for that we will need our dress and the neckline. So I will take my neckline, make sure that the seams are in line. You can even pin it together. It will be easier for you to draw around it, and it will not move in place as much. I'm just pinning them together. Now that I have it pinned together, I will place it like this. So one middle piece goes here according to the edge, and then another piece, center piece, will go here. We can start by drawing around one piece and then later draw around another, because it's now a little bit difficult to hold them both in one place. So just simply draw around and then place this one exactly the same, and again draw around. So now we can move our dress aside, remove the pins, we won't need it any longer. Then take your measuring tape and measure 4 centimeters, maybe even 5 centimeters from this drawn line. And make small cuts just to mark where the middle of both front and back is. And now I want you to cut exactly the same piece from the fusible interfacing and attach it to the wrong side of this part. And then let's move to our overlock and we will start overlocking. So it's now time to go to our overlock and we will do some stitching with it. And of course we have to thread it, and for today we are using Mettler Cerakote thread, which is a universal overlock thread. It gives beautiful elastic seams, it sews evenly and gives absolutely flat, clean seams on all fabrics. It's very trouble-free thread, so you can use it on all sorts of different overlocks. It also does not shrink, it does not lose its color, so you can wash it even in high temperatures. And of course, here is the range of different colors that they have available. Today I will be using this one. See how beautiful this color is, and it will go perfectly with my dress. Because our overlock seams will be just decorative finishes and they will only prevent fabric from fraying, but they will not be the carrying seams on this dress, so we don't need to use all 4 threads. 3 threads is okay at this time. I will go ahead and move this part, we will not need it. And now I want you to take your dress, and first we will do overlocking on our shoulders. So take one edge, put it like this, and just run your overlock See how beautiful the seam is turning out with our Cerakote thread. And now repeat the same move on all shoulder seams. So now that your shoulder seams are overlocked, it's time to move to our side seams and then all throughout the hemline. Take the side seam at the top, take one seam allowance, put it on the serger and start sewing. So now that you're moving to the beginning of the curve, I want you to continue to serge like this. And then serge all around the curve. So once you serge all around the curve, fold the fabric like this. And then move to your side seam again and continue to stitch it to the top. So now one half is overlocked and you can just start overlocking the other side the same way. So now that every side seam is overlocked and so is the bottom, we have to overlock our sleeves. So to do that, make sure the seams are open, put it like this and then start. Once you come across your side seam, just make sure that it's also staying flat. And do exactly the same with another sleeve. And the last thing that we need to do while we are at overlock, we have to overlock this edge of our neckband. So just very simply, I'm going to overlock all around it. So once you have overlocked your neckband, we can move to the sewing machine and we won't be needing our overlock for this project anymore. So now we have moved to our sewing machine and now we have left our hemming to do and also finished the neckline, and all of those seams do not need that much elasticity as the side seams and the shoulder seams. So I just went ahead and switched the Mettler Ceraflex thread with Mettler Ceralon thread, which is the one here. If you live outside Europe, you might know this thread as Metrocen. So this is an all-purpose thread, so it doesn't matter if you're sewing linen, silk, cotton, blends or any other fabric, this is the perfect thread for the task. It has high tear resistance, which means it has very great seam strength, also avoids thread breakage, also optimal elongation, which means that seams are elastic, smooth and has ideal care properties. Also, this thread has ideal gliding properties, meaning that it's very smooth process to sew with it. And all in all, it is a very great thread to have. And I just wanted to show you the color range for Ceralon. So here is the color range for Ceralon. You can see that it not only has different colors, but also it has different shades of different colors, so you can match the thread based on your project perfectly. So let's get started with our sewing. So now we will start by hemming our sleeves first. And here is how we are going to do it. We will turn the garment to the right side out. like this. We will start from the armpit side and we will fold our overlock seam like this, and we will sew about 1/2 centimeter from the edge. So now the important part is to focus that your hemline is folded at the same width and that you're sewing exactly at the same width the entire time. So the good thing is to focus that while you're sewing, you're folding the seam allowance correctly, and also pay attention to this spot because this is our checkpoint. So here you can see that while I'm sewing, my edge of the fabric has to be at the middle of this foot. So this means that if I focus that it stays at the middle of the foot, the entire hemline will be at the same width from the side. And then just continue to fold and sew. I want you to really take your time. You're not in a rush. We are doing our finishing touches. This seam will be visible outside, so you really want it to look beautifully straight and very, very neat. So once you went around the entire sleeve, it will look like this from the right side, and from the wrong side, from the inside of the garment, it will look like this. So the overlock seam is not peeking out and the edge looks very smooth and very clean. So there are many different techniques how you can finish the hemline, how you can finish the sleeve. This one is definitely one of the easiest ways, but it still gives that really pretty look outside and very clean look in the inside. So not always more difficult is better. Sometimes easy option is also great option. So now I want you to repeat the same with another sleeve, and then we will start hemming our dress. So now that the sleeves are finished, it's time to do the hemming at the bottom. And now, while our dress is the right side out, I want you to take a piece of curve here, not at the entire top, but a little bit below that line. And same as we did with the sleeve, we will be folding and sewing at the same distance. So again, we are going around and folding, and we are focusing that the feet goes in the middle of the edge so that the entire seam is straight and at the same width from the edge. So when you're doing a curve, you might find that it's a bit difficult to fold the fabric. So really take your time, do not rush, because we are using a very narrow seam allowance. We can do a fold like this. If our seam allowance at the edge would be longer, we would not be able to do such beautiful curve because it would wrinkle up. But now that we have a very narrow seam allowance, it's okay to do that. It might be a bit difficult, but just fold and sew and just don't hurry at all. So now that you've sewn from one edge to the other, I want you to really pay attention how I will do it here. So I will fold it a little bit and I will continue to sew till the seams meet. Then I will just quickly turn my fabric like this and I will sew about 1/2 centimeter up the seam. Then while my needle is pushed in the middle, I will rotate my fabric 90 degrees and I will make a few more stitches like this. And then again, I will lift the foot and rotate the fabric again, and I will fold my fabric just like I did with another side, and then continue to sew another curve. So once you went around the hemline, the side will look like this, and the rest of the hemline will be beautifully curved and crispy looking. In the inside it will look very neat as well. So now we will have the last step in our sewing process, which is to add the neckline. And to do that, I want you to take the neckline piece that we did. With your dress right side out, you will have to pin this piece to it. You will put right sides together. Here is my front of the neckband and here is the front of my neckline. I connect them at the center and I will take pin and I will pin it. I will do exactly the same with the back piece. Right sides together. And pin it again. And then I will pin it at the shoulders. And then just add a few more pins to really make sure that the edge of the neckband is at the edge of the neckline. And pin all around the neckband. Now that the entire neckband is pinned, I want you to take the fusible interfacing strap. It should be about 1 centimeter in width and a bit longer than your neckline, so it looks like this. Sometimes you can find fusible interfacing straps like this already in store. They usually come in big rolls, but if you don't find it in store, you can also just do it yourself. Just take fusible interfacing and cut it, making sure that these threads are running vertically through the entire strap, because we really need to reinforce this part of the neckline to really hold its shape. So now we will take our neckline. Remember, we have 0.7 centimeters of seam allowance here. We will place our fusible interfacing strap. Actually, you know what? I will turn the dress inside out. It will be probably easier to sew from that side. Put the fusible interfacing strap, put it under your sewing machine. Distance from the needle to the edge here is about 7 millimeters. So I will just start sewing and placing the fusible interfacing while I go. This will be a little bit difficult at the edge, however, I want you to keep sewing. Just slow down a pace if you need, and then continue to sew all around. Now that you sew all around the neckline, I want you to take out the pins, and then I want you to go to the ironing board and iron on this fusible interfacing and then return to the sewing machine. So now that you have ironed on this strap, we have the literally final seam left to do. So holding your neckline like this, I want you to fold this neckband. All the seam allowance is pushed to the side. I want you to put it under your foot, and we will make a seam 1 millimeter from this side, making sure that our entire seam allowance is on this side. And on this side we have no seam allowance, only on this one, okay? So now about 1 millimeter from the side. Really take your time, don't rush. While sewing, make sure that this seam is nicely opened and not like this. You want it to be really opened, so the more open your seam, the more beautiful and the more crisp the neckline. And now simply sew all around the neckline. So now that you did the overstitching here, it looks like this from the wrong side, and I want you to take your scissors and trim all the excess seam allowance. We will not need it in this place when we are talking about neckline. So the more narrow the seam allowance, the more beautiful the neckline will look like. So we definitely do not need this excess fabric, so just cut it off all around the neckline. Here is how much seam allowance I am cutting out, and you can see that this is my main neckline seam, and here is the top stitching seam, so I'm cutting very close to this seam. So now I want you to continue to cut all around the neckline, and then final step, pressing. So for our final press, while your dress is wrong side out, I want you to take the neckline, put it on this small ironing board. It will be easier for you to access the kneading points. And I want you to fold the neckline like this, and then secure it in place with a little bit of steam and pressing. Do not overpress the seam, because if you overpress the seam, it might be visible on the right side of the garment, and we want to avoid it. So go around the neckline, neatly folding, gently pressing, and giving it a little bit of steam. If you don't have a steam iron, then just use a very thin fabric cloth, wet it in the water, and just iron through that. It will work just as good. Maybe a little bit more hassle, but still does the job. So go all around the neckline. So once you press the neckline from the wrong side of the garment, it's time to pull it right side out. And again, you will go around the neckline, neatly pressing it. You will go through the ends of your sleeves, press it as well. Then you will go to the hemline, you will neatly press it as well. Give it a little bit of steam to really lock it in place. And then just give this dress in general a little bit of iron, and you'll be finished. So this is it, and I hope you enjoyed the sewing class and you have made your dress. I would really love to see your makes, so please do feel free to send me the photo of your dress via Instagram messages. I would really love to see your creations based on this sewing class. If you have any kind of question, please leave them in the comment section below, and I will try my best to answer it. So thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please hit the subscribe button if you're not subscribed yet, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!